Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. She was already dead by the time she opened the door. The porch light flickered, struggling to stay alive against the October wind. Beyond the warped glass of the front door, two shadows stood still, unmoving, small, childlike. They hadn't knocked, not at first. The wind howled through the tall trees that lined the old property, rattling the loose gutter. The floorboards groaned under her bare feet as she approached the door with a frown. Her name was Janie Telford. She was 32, a teacher, liked jigsaw puzzles and cherry soda. She wasn't the type to scare easily. But something was wrong tonight, very wrong. A soft knock echoed, knock, then again, knock, knock. She peeked through the peephole. Two children, a boy and a girl, standing inches from the door, looking up as if they'd been waiting their whole lives for her to notice them. Their clothes were old, outdated, torn in places. The girl had two neat braids, charred at the ends. The boy held something in his hand, a toy. Janie tilted her head. She should have walked away. She should have run. Instead, she cracked open the door, just a sliver. "Are you kids okay?" No answer, only the wind. Then the girl whispered, "Please, we need to come in." Janie's heart beat faster. "Where are your parents?" The boy raised his head. His eyes were completely black. No whites, no irises, no pupils, just endless, glossy void. Janie's breath caught in her throat. She slammed the door shut and backed away, heart hammering, but it was too late. The doorknob turned slowly, even though she'd locked it. Click. Then, silence. 2 days later, Obsidian leaned back in the rickety desk chair at the Eerie Point Herald office, her boots up on the desk, a lukewarm coffee resting on her thigh. "So, let me get this straight," she muttered to her editor through a mouthful of granola bar. "You're sending me to investigate creepy kids and ghost stories because your actual investigative reporter caught mono." Mike, a 50-something burnout with nicotine-stained fingers and one good tooth, grunted. "Don't make it sound so stupid. We've had 5 reports in 2 weeks of children with black eyes showing up on people's porches. Town council's breathing down my neck." Obsidian rolled her eyes and sipped the bitter coffee. "And let me guess, they can't come in unless you invite them. Ooh, terrifying." "You're not funny," Mike said. "This is your beat now." "Awesome," she muttered, biting down hard on the granola bar. "Dead-eyed demon toddlers. I always dreamed of this moment." Later that night, Obsidian stood outside the old house on Mulberry Street. Janie Telford's house. Police had no leads, no forced entry, no murder weapon, no blood. Just her body, twisted backward over the staircase, like she'd been thrown, eyes wide open, lips curled in a scream, every bone in her spine shattered. The neighbors had found the front door wide open. Obsidian exhaled through her nose, stepping over the yellow police tape with a sigh. The house was dark inside, cold. She clicked on her flashlight. Dust, silence, and something else. The air smelled like ash. She wandered through the narrow hallway, boots creaking on warped wood. A family photo sat tilted on the mantel, Janie, smiling, alone. Her voice recorder beeped softly in her coat pocket. "First on-site report. I'm inside the house of Janie Telford, victim of what police are calling a freak accident. No sign of forced entry. Locals believe it's connected to the town's urban legend of the so-called black-eyed children. I know, it's ridiculous, but the air in here, it's off, heavy, the temperature's dropping. She paused. A faint creak echoed from upstairs. Obsidian froze. Her flashlight flickered. She clicked it off, then back on. The hallway was empty. She was alone. Wasn't she? At home, Apollo was cooking a late-night grilled cheese in the tiny rental kitchen. Scarlett sat on the counter, swinging her legs, scrolling her phone while Mex lazily tuned a guitar on the couch. "How's the freak parade?" Apollo asked when Obsidian walked in. She tossed her coat on a hook, lips tight. "Creep factor, 11, she muttered. "Found nothing. Smelled like something burned, though." "Burned?" "Like burnt wood. Not cigarettes, not firewood. More like an old attic that caught fire years ago and never stopped smoldering." Scarlett glanced up from her phone. "That's super normal, not haunted at all." Obsidian smirked and grabbed a cold soda from the fridge. "Want to come with me tomorrow night? There's this creepy rundown playground near the woods. Locals say it was built where the old orphanage burned down." Apollo's hand froze over the pan. "Wait, the one from the early 1900s? "Yeah, you know about it?" He nodded slowly. "My mom told me stories growing up. Said the kids screamed so loud the flames turned to smoke just to drown them out." Scarlett whistled low. Obsidian tried to laugh, but something felt wrong. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, as if something outside the window was listening, waiting, watching. Outside the apartment, 3:33 a.m., a small face pressed against the window, eyes black as oil, unblinking, silent, waiting for an invitation. The wind was too loud for how still the trees were. Obsidian stood alone in the rotting skeleton of what was once Eerie Point's only playground. Her breath puffed in pale clouds as the cold gnawed at her throat. It was nearing midnight, and the air smelled like wet rust and dying leaves. The trees loomed like dark sentinels around her, forming a jagged circle, their claw-like branches stretching into the cloud-thick sky. Her boots crunched across gravel, her flashlight beam danced across rusted monkey bars, a splintered slide, and a cracked wooden merry-go-round covered in moss. It let out a long, slow creak, spinning faintly on its own. Obsidian paused, watching it. She hadn't touched it. There was no wind. She raised her voice recorder to her lips, whispering as if speaking louder might draw something closer. "Second location report. Playground sits 50 yards from the ruins of the old orphanage. Structures dated, unstable, seems abandoned since forever. Locals say children are seen here around twilight, sometimes later, always quiet, always watching. Nothing yet, but the atmosphere feels like it's holding its breath." She walked deeper into the park. A set of rusted swings hung lifeless from squealing chains. The paint on the metal had long since peeled, exposing streaks of orange corrosion. Her flashlight flickered again. Then one of the swings began to move. Gently, back and forth, just one. A soft squeak. Squeak, squeak. Obsidian froze, not from the cold. She looked around. No wind, no animals, no reason. Another creak behind her. The merry-go-round spun a little faster now. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes slowly scanned the tree line, and that's when she saw them. One, then two, then three. Half shrouded in shadow. Pale faces, still, silent, black eyes. emotionless. Children, watching her from the trees. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her hand gripped the flashlight like a weapon, though she knew it would be useless. The closest child took a step forward. Obsidian didn't move. The child tilted its head, then whispered, "Are you going to play with us?" No lips moved. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, inside her ears, behind her eyes. Obsidian turned to run, but the path back to the car was no longer there, only trees. More children appeared between the trunks, some barefoot, some holding cracked dolls, some missing fingers, all with the same soulless, glossy black stare. She stumbled backward, breath trembling. Her voice recorder tumbled into the dirt, still running. The flashlight in her hand sputtered and went dark. The squeaking of the swing grew louder, faster. The spinning ride behind her groaned. The girl at the front stepped into the open now. Her braids were burnt at the ends. Her hands were blackened like coal. She said nothing, just looked at Obsidian, unblinking. The spinning merry-go-round came to an abrupt stop. Silence fell, and from behind Obsidian, another voice, a child's, a whisper right against her ear. "You don't remember, but we remember you." She turned. No one there. She bolted. Back at the apartment, 12:49 a.m. Scarlet startled as Obsidian slammed the door behind her, pale and shaking. Leaves clung to her coat. Her jeans were wet to the knees. Dirt streaked her hands. Apollo dropped his phone. "What the hell?" "They're real," she gasped, voice hoarse. "They were at the playground. A dozen of them, maybe more." Scarlet helped her peel off her coat. "Wait, what do you mean they?" "The black-eyed children." Apollo and Mex exchanged glances. Obsidian looked at all three of them with wild eyes. "I saw them. They watched me. One of them whispered to me. They said they remember me." Scarlet couldn't sleep, not after seeing her sister like that. She paced the upstairs hallway, phone in hand, chewing her thumbnail. Mex had fallen asleep on the couch, snoring gently. Apollo was downstairs with Obsidian, trying to calm her down. Scarlet stopped by her bedroom window and peeked out. The yard was empty, dark, still. Then, a shape perched on the roof across the street. A child, sitting perfectly still, head tilted, looking directly at her. Scarlet's breath caught. She blinked. The child was now closer, crawling toward the edge of the roof with impossible movements, jerky, like something wrong with a puppet. Scarlet yanked the curtain shut. She backed away from the window. But something behind the glass whispered, "You can't hide from us." Outside, 3:07 a.m. The black-eyed children surrounded the house, silent, unmoving, waiting. Obsidian nearly tripped over the doll before she even saw it. The sky was gray that morning. A low fog coiled along the grass like a slow-moving flood of ghosts. The town of Eerie Point felt colder than usual, as if the temperature had dropped just for her. She'd stepped outside to grab the mail when her boots struck something solid. At first glance, she thought it was just debris, maybe a chunk of burnt wood someone had tossed from a nearby yard. But when she crouched down, she realized it was a doll. Small porcelain, blackened and cracked. Its arms were melted to the torso, one eye missing, the other completely scorched black. A permanent burnt smile smeared across its face, like it had grinned through the fire. Obsidian didn't want to touch it, but she did. The second her fingers brushed the doll's charred surface, the world ripped open. Fog poured over her vision, a sickly greenish gray, thick as smoke. She was standing in a hallway now, wooden floors, dust everywhere, oil lamps sputtering. The walls groaned as if in pain. She was small again, her hands tiny, calloused. She looked down. She was wearing a tattered, soot-stained dress. Her fingers gripped a stuffed rabbit with no eyes. Voices murmured around her, children's voices, crying, whimpering, pleading. A door creaked open ahead. A pale figure in a black veil stood in the hallway. The matron, tall, silent, dressed like morning itself. Her skin looked like wax stretched too tightly over bone. Her eyes glimmered yellow in the lamplight. Behind her, the other children shuffled like shadows. Obsidian turned her head slowly. Each one of them had pitch-black eyes. Apollo rushed outside barefoot. "Obsidian?" She was lying flat on the porch, limbs twitching, her eyes fluttering rapidly under her lids. Scarlet and Mex hovered behind him, panic on their faces. "Is she seizing?" Scarlet cried. Apollo knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. The moment his fingers met her skin, she sat up with a scream, chest heaving, eyes wild. The doll rolled off the porch and shattered into ash. "She was wearing a dress," Obsidian whispered, staring at the steam rising from her untouched tea. "It wasn't mine. It was old, burnt at the hem and the hallway. It was part of the orphanage. I think I saw her." "Who?" Scarlet asked. "The matron." Apollo frowned. "Are you saying you were one of the kids?" Obsidian didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to Scarlet. "Did Mom ever tell you anything weird about my adoption?" Scarlet blinked. "No. I mean, you were adopted as a baby. That's all I know. They said they found you during a storm on a church step." Obsidian stood up, pacing. She turned toward them, her eyes dark and terrified. "I think I'm from here, from that orphanage years ago." Mex volunteered to check the breaker after the lights began flickering again. Apollo was out picking up groceries. Scarlet had fallen asleep on the couch with a horror movie still buzzing on low volume. Obsidian sat on the stairs above him, holding a flashlight. "You good down there?" she called. Mex's voice echoed back. "Yeah, I think a fuse is half blown. Hang on, what the hell?" "What?" "Did one of you guys go down here barefoot?" Obsidian froze. "What?" Mex stepped into view, holding up a dusty footprint pressed into the concrete floor, small like a child's, bare, singed at the toes. Obsidian's skin prickled. "There's more than one." Scarlet couldn't sleep. Again, something about the way Obsidian had screamed the night before hadn't left her chest. She spent the entire morning digging through town records, digitized files buried deep in the town library's private online archives, and she found it. A scanned, water-stained photo taken in 1901. The orphanage staff posed on the front steps. Dead center was a tall woman in a black veil. Behind her, rows of children. And in the far right corner, a girl, hair wild, eyes staring into the camera. Scarlet zoomed in, even pixelated. She knew that face. It was Obsidian. That night, 2:41 a.m. Obsidian woke to find her hands covered in soot. Ash clung to the sheets. Something whispered from the closet. "She burned us all, but you got away." He only opened the door because the child sounded like his daughter. The security footage would later show him standing there barefoot in his pajamas, one hand trembling on the doorknob. A soft knock, then another, then, "Daddy, I'm cold." And he opened it. The camera glitched, and when it came back, the living room was empty, except for the man. Bent backward over his recliner, eyes gone, mouth frozen in an open, impossible scream, blood streaked the carpet. His fingers had been snapped clean off. His chest was scorched, no signs of forced entry. Only a black, oily handprint smeared across the inside of the door. At the Eerie Point Herald, next morning, Obsidian stared at the death report with a cold fist in her stomach. "He invited one in," she muttered. Mike leaned over her shoulder, puffing on a nicotine gum like it was a cigar. "Can't print that," he said, "not without hard proof." She shoved the folder across the desk. "That's the third body in 2 weeks, and every single one of them opened their doors to a child." Coincidence? She stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "Then why do I keep waking up covered in ash?" He didn't have an answer for that. Back at the house, Apollo was rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he flipped through the old orphanage blueprints Obsidian had dug up from the Historical Society. Scarlet had the photo blown up on her laptop. The matron's veil seemed to move the longer you looked at it. The children behind her, unmoving shadows. "You really think this is you?" she asked. Obsidian nodded. "I remember the hallway now, the way the floor bent under our feet, the smell of coal, burnt sugar." Mex returned from the basement, holding something in his gloved hands, an old tin box, inside burnt fragments of paper, a small metal locket fused shut by heat, and a folded-up page, browned with time. Scarlet carefully opened it. The words were scrawled in angry cursive. "The fire will protect me. The children are bound by the flame. Do not let them inside. They will return for her." Obsidian swallowed hard. Her. Apollo looked at her, the truth slowly dawning. "They mean you." Town Archives, that evening. The deeper Obsidian dug, the darker the story became. The matron, Evelyn Merose, was never arrested. Rumors claimed she made a deal with a forest devil, an entity that demanded sacrifice in exchange for eternal youth and prosperity. When the townspeople discovered the truth, they tried to shut the orphanage down, but she set it ablaze before they could. 73 children died in the fire. Only one child was ever unaccounted for. A girl, age unknown, name Obsidian. That night, 1:12 a.m., Scarlet woke up with a start. Someone was in her room. She felt it before she even opened her eyes. The air was wrong, thick, hot, smelled like smoke and charred meat. Slowly, she turned her head toward the closet. It was cracked open, just slightly. A child's hand slowly reached around the edge of the door. Black fingers, blistered palm. Scarlet froze, then the voice came, soft, right beside her bed. "It's warm in here. Please, let me stay." She lunged for the lamp and clicked it on. The room was empty, but her breath hung in the air like fog, and something had written on her mirror in soot. "Let us in." Back in the living room, Obsidian sat on the couch, gripping the torn diary page from the tin box, her knees pulled to her chest. Mex was pacing the room. Apollo stood at the window, shotgun in hand, not loaded, but it made them all feel better. Then, the lights went out, every single one. Even the flashlight app on their phones stopped working. "Stay calm," Obsidian whispered. from outside the window, knocking, not on the door, on the glass, tiny fists, dozens of them, tap, tap, tap. Then one voice, high, sweet. Please, we're cold. Apollo backed away. Scarlet stared at the front door, her voice barely above a breath. They can't come in unless we invite them, right? No one answered, because now the doorknob was turning, even though it was locked. The walls had started breathing sometime after midnight, not loudly, just subtly. A slow inward pull, like someone sighing behind the drywall. Obsidian stood in the hallway outside the bathroom, barefoot and frozen. The vent above her let out a long wheeze, but the sound didn't stop there. It moved down the hall, beneath the floorboards, behind the plaster. She placed her hand flat against the wall, warm, too warm, as if something on the other side was pressing against it, and exhaling. Earlier that evening, after the doorknob turned on its own, the group barricaded the door with the heavy oak bookcase from the upstairs hall. Obsidian moved methodically, her jaw clenched. Apollo loaded batteries into every flashlight and lantern they owned. Scarlet duct-taped black paper over the windows. Mex checked every closet, every drawer, every room, but there was no comfort to be found, because they could feel the children watching them, even when they weren't visible. That presence, cold, burning at the edges of awareness, never left, not even for a second. Mex, 10:39 p.m. He was brushing his teeth when the lights in the bathroom flickered. The bulb buzzed, then died with a pop. He spat into the sink and clicked on his phone flashlight. The mirror was fogged over. Strange, considering the water had been cold. He reached up to wipe it with a towel. But the towel didn't move. It was pressed against something. He blinked. There was no reflection of him. Instead, the mirror showed the bathroom behind him. Only the tub was full of black water, and there was a child floating just beneath the surface. Her eyes open, her mouth moving without sound. Then she turned her head directly toward him. Mex stumbled back with a yell, knocking the toothbrush cup off the counter. It shattered. When he looked again, the mirror just showed him, and an empty tub. Scarlet, 11:07 p.m. She was scrubbing the kitchen counter with shaking hands when she felt it. Breath, not hers, on the back of her neck. She turned sharply. Nothing. Then again. Hot. Damp. Right on her skin. She bolted out of the kitchen without even turning off the light. Apollo, 11:48 p.m. The static came from the old radio in the attic. They hadn't used it in months. He'd stored it there after a flea market binge last summer. Now it was on, buzzing, humming, whispering. He crept up the stairs slowly, crowbar in one hand. The attic door was cracked. Inside, dust, cobwebs, and the radio. Playing. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the dial. Don't leave her again. The voice came from the dark corner of the attic. Apollo turned. Nothing, but something moved behind the boxes. Fast. Too fast. He slammed the door shut and didn't go back. Obsidian, 12:33 a.m. She was alone in the living room. The others had gathered their sleeping bags in the hallway upstairs, where they could keep an eye on each other. But Obsidian couldn't sleep, not with the journal page still etched in her mind. They will return for her. She stared at the fireplace. Something was moving inside it, slow and quiet, as if dragging a limb. Then a knock, but not from the door, from inside the fireplace. She crawled forward, trembling. The ashes were undisturbed, but the knocking came again. 3 gentle raps, then a whisper. "We remember how it felt to burn." "Do you?" The room went black, and when her vision returned, she wasn't in the house anymore. Fog, smoke, a wooden floor slick with blood. Children screamed behind locked doors. Obsidian, small again, stood in front of the matron. Her veil fluttered like wings made of soot. "You left them," she said. Obsidian shook her head. "No, I didn't. You were the only one who mattered." The matron lifted her hand. Dozens of tiny fingers reached from the smoke behind her, black-eyed, burnt, still screaming. And then she woke up on the kitchen floor, alone, covered in soot. The windows were open, the house was ice cold. They regrouped in the hallway, pale and shaking. "I can't do this," Scarlet whispered. "They're inside. I know it. They're in the walls, in the attic, in the freaking mirrors." Obsidian's voice was dead calm. "They don't need an invitation anymore." Apollo looked at her, eyes wide. "What?" She held up her arm. A fresh, blackened handprint was burned into her skin. "They were never locked out," she said. "They were just waiting." Outside the boarded-up window, something scratched. Not hard, not loud, just a single finger, dragging slowly across the wood. The smoke came first, then the whispering, then the children. Obsidian couldn't breathe, not just because the air in the house had turned thick with ash, but because the walls were shifting, literally. Doors that once led to bedrooms now opened into endless black hallways. Ceilings sagged, wallpaper curled away like peeling skin. The old grandfather clock in the living room had started ticking backward, loud, violent, wrong. The house wasn't a house anymore. It was a mirror of something far worse. Earlier that day, the house was no longer safe. Every shadow whispered, every wall exhaled, and every window seemed to breathe. By dawn, they knew there was only one option left. Obsidian spread the charred pages of the matron's diary across the kitchen table, hands trembling. "It all started there," she said. "The orphanage wasn't just a home. It was the altar, the deal, the fire." Apollo's jaw clenched. "You think if we go there, we can end this?" Obsidian's voice was steady. "No, I think if we don't go there, we'll never leave this town alive." Scarlet and Mex exchanged a long, heavy look, and without another word, they started packing lanterns, matches, and the doll fragments into a duffel bag. When they stepped out into the pre-dawn fog, the house behind them groaned, like it knew they were leaving. The drive to the orphanage felt longer than it should have, the narrow road swallowing their headlights whole. The trees on either side leaned in close like they were eavesdropping. No one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was survival. They'd barely slept. Scarlet couldn't stop shaking. Mex refused to be alone in any room. Apollo had a bloody gash across his forearm where something invisible had clawed him during the night. Obsidian said nothing, because she remembered now. She remembered the fire. The orphanage ruins. They went back, all 4 of them, exhausted, armed with crowbars, matches, and adrenaline. The orphanage ruins were nothing more than a blackened husk now, overgrown vines curling over stone steps that led to nowhere. Half the roof had collapsed long ago. The skeleton of a rusted swing still hung from a broken oak tree nearby. It was dead land, yet something about it pulsed, quietly, like a heart buried deep beneath the soil. Obsidian stepped inside first, and the moment her foot touched the charred wood floor, the world shattered. Fog roared in, choking, freezing. Suddenly, they were no longer in the ruins. They were inside the orphanage, alive, breathing, screaming. The fire hadn't happened yet, but it would, very soon. Obsidian felt her body change, felt her mind split. Part of her was still here, herself, but the other part wasn't a memory. It was a return, like she'd never left this place, like the fire had buried her, but not deep enough. She hadn't just survived the orphanage fire. She'd been born again, reborn, dragged back through time and flesh, forced to return. A reincarnation of the only child who got away. The others, Apollo, Scarlet, Mex, they hadn't changed. They stood frozen, staring around at the flickering oil lamps and warped wood. Behind them, laughter, children's laughter, dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed, their skin blistered and peeling, their mouths sewn into silent, eternal screams. Scarlet gripped Obsidian's arm. "We're not dreaming," she said. "This isn't a memory." Obsidian nodded, voice cracking. "No, it's a resurrection." From the top of the stairs, the black-veiled figure emerged, the matron. Her veil fluttered like smoke even in still air. Her hands were bone white, stained with ash. She stepped slowly, deliberately, and the children parted for her like shadows fleeing firelight. She didn't speak, but her presence screamed. Obsidian took a step forward. "You killed them," she whispered. "You made a deal with something inhuman." The matron turned her head slightly. "They were ungrateful," she hissed, voice like burning sugar. "But not you. You were chosen." The floor under Apollo cracked. Flames shot up through it like a geyser. Mex grabbed him and yanked him back just in time. But the hallway behind them collapsed, swallowed in fire and void. Obsidian stepped into the center of the burning room. "Why me?" The matron's veil lifted just slightly. "Because you survived the fire, but never left it." The children had been sacrificed, not by accident, not by negligence, by design. The matron had offered their souls to a creature, something in the forest, ancient and ravenous. In exchange, she'd been granted unnatural power. But when the children found out, they fought back, and she punished them. She burned the orphanage. Obsidian alone had been spared, hidden by another child, a friend whose name had long since been erased, and the evil had waited all this time for Obsidian's return to finish the offering. As the fire surrounded them, Scarlet saw something glowing in the corner of the warped room. A doll, unburnt, pristine, identical to the one left on their porch. Inside its eyes, flickers of flame. "The doll's the anchor," Scarlet shouted. "It's how they're tied here." Mex grabbed it and tried to crush it, but the porcelain was hot, too hot. Apollo found a rusted oil lamp. Obsidian grabbed the matches. Together they doused the doll and lit it. It shrieked. Not the matron. The children, all of them. Their voices merged into one final scream so loud the walls began to crack, the windows shattered inward, and the fire twisted into a funnel of howling smoke. As the doll burned, Obsidian reached for the child she remembered, the friend who had hidden her all those years ago. The girl stood among the black-eyed children now, face blank, but something in her eyes remembered. Obsidian whispered her name. The girl blinked, then turned away, and vanished. The orphanage began to crumble. This time there was no magic holding it up, no memory loop, only death. The four of them sprinted for the doors, coughing, faces streaked with ash and tears. The moment they passed the threshold, the world returned to present day. The ruins were quiet again, but the doll was nothing but ash. Back at the house, later that night, Scarlet stared at the boarded-up windows. Mex sat silently, bandaging Apollo's arm. Obsidian stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing her hands, but no matter how much she scrubbed, they still smelled like smoke. Far away, in a different town. A woman walks to her door. There's a knock. 2 children stand on the porch, eyes black as pitch. They smile. "Can we come in?" They thought they had escaped the fire, but the fire had followed them home. Smoke leaked from the vents, not thick enough to trigger the alarm, just enough to fill their lungs with dread. It was nearly 4 a.m., the hour when things die or refuse to stay dead. The 4 of them sat in silence in the living room, surrounded by makeshift barricades, scattered salt lines, flickering lanterns, and a constant choking fear. No one had spoken in nearly 30 minutes, because no one had to. They all felt it. The house was no longer theirs. Every reflective surface in the house cracked at once. The bathroom mirror shattered in a single breath. The microwave door splintered. Scarlet's makeup compact snapped shut on its own. Mex watched his own reflection blink when he hadn't. Obsidian closed her laptop after the screen showed a soot-covered child standing behind her. They'd tried everything: salt, fire, prayers they didn't believe in, but the black-eyed children were no longer just visitors. They were inside. Obsidian stood slowly and unrolled a map of Eerie Point's woods onto the floor. The matron's diary said they were bound by the flame. The fire let them in, so we finish it. Apollo looked up. How? We returned to where it started, the forest altar, the real one, where she made the deal. Scarlet swallowed hard. You think it's still there? Obsidian met her eyes. I think it never left. The forest swallowed them whole. Every step forward felt like a punishment. Trees bent inward, branches clawed at their coats, shadows moved between trunks. They reached the altar after 2 hours of silence. It was still there, a twisted stone slab covered in soot and black vines, burnt dolls nailed to nearby trees, bones scattered in the dirt. Obsidian stepped forward, then dropped the final doll they'd recovered from the ruins, the last anchor, the one that still twitched when no one was looking. She poured the gasoline, lit the match, and dropped it. They came screaming from the trees, from the fog, from beneath the earth. The black-eyed children emerged like a wave of teeth and smoke, silent, then screaming, then silent again. Hundreds, pale skin glowing with the firelight, charred hands reaching. Apollo swung the crowbar. Scarlet screamed. Mex hurled salt and kicked one child back into the darkness. But Obsidian just stood there, shaking, staring at the altar as the doll burned. The fire turned blue. The children stopped moving, one by one. They looked at her. Obsidian closed her eyes and whispered, "You can rest now. You don't belong to her anymore." One child stepped forward, face half burned, skin cracked like charred paper, lips trembling. "You were supposed to die with us." Obsidian's voice cracked. "I know." For a second, just one, everything was still. Then they screamed. A high-pitched wail that shook the trees and cracked the stone altar. The fire exploded upward into a pillar of black flame. The altar split down the middle, and the children disappeared, gone, silence. They returned home before sunrise. The house felt empty, not peaceful, just hollow. They didn't speak, they didn't sleep. They just sat together, watching the horizon lighten like they weren't sure it was real. Weeks later, life moved on. Scarlet dyed her hair pink and got a new job at the library. Mex took up painting again. Apollo started therapy. Obsidian wrote a single article about the Eerie Point fires and never submitted it. They didn't talk about the matron, or the forest, or the children until one night. A little girl rides her bike down a cul-de-sac. She slows when she sees two children standing on the corner. They smile at her. Their eyes are pure black. "We're lost," they whisper. "Can we come in?"